And welcome back to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Of course, I'm Ryan Thomas. Thank you so much for tuning in to this somewhat premiere edition of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. As we're moving on from last season to this season, we're looking forward. Of course, I appreciate all 160 plus of you tuning in to this podcast tonight. I'm going to discuss a lot of different topics pertaining to free agency for the Buffalo Bills thus far, the re-signing moves, a lot of different pieces here, players that were once Bills that are no longer Bills moving forward, and players that I believe that the Buffalo Bills should target in this free agency period. Of course, throughout this podcast, I want you guys to do me a huge favor. Please feel free to chime in and fire away any comment, of course, as long as it's appropriate, in the comment section below to chat with yours truly. I'd like to hear from you guys. Who are some players that you would want the Buffalo Bills to go out and target? And last and certainly not least, I want to remind you guys that each Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern time, the Thomas Take will be live right here where you're tuning in Wednesday night every week at 8 o'clock. Even in the quote-unquote off-season. There is no off-season for me. I really enjoy the off-season just as much as the games. I love to see how these teams come together to being the final product as those teams take the field. Of course, the Buffalo Bills being the team that I cover the most. I want to provide Bills Mafia with, of course, a hello. Hello, Robbie. Let's talk 716 Sports. Mr. Lasagna, that's the guy right there, Mr. Lasagna 716. Hello, go Bills. Of course, you guys can fire away your comments in the comment section below. 300 plus people right now on tuning in live. So, of course, I appreciate all of you. If you want to spread the word that this show is live, get more people on. I want to hear more from you, the Bills Mafia, getting all your takes as well as diving into some of my own. So, with that being said, I'd like to start off each and every show with somewhat of an opening statement. Sometimes I always just kind of flow into things as I like to. But in this case, I would like to go to a statement that I put out on the official Thomas Take Sports Podcast Facebook page. So we're going to share the screen here and go to the next topic here of just how I'm feeling as far as an opening statement to the Bills Mafia. So, of course, I put this out yesterday, and to me, this kind of shows just where my head is at as far as releasing guys like Jordan Poyer, releasing guys like Trey White, releasing guys like Mitch Morse, who had been a part of this team for quite some time. Now, it's tough for the fans. It's tough for myself. It's tough for you guys to see longtime players released, but we should appreciate the past for what those players were able to provide and change as a part of the culture. That's a word that's thrown around quite often, but embracing the present and the new challenges that come about building this roster and look to the future and embracing the future, new additions, and how those additions will fit. Make no mistake about it. This team will be younger, and it's potentially going to be even better with the youth movement in Buffalo. I think a lot of teams right now are looking at getting younger first and foremost, but they're also looking at, okay, how do we become more athletic? How do we kind of get adjusted to the times that is this new era of football? And I think there's one thorn in the side of everybody right now, not just the Buffalo Bills, but the rest of the NFL, the Kansas City Chiefs. That's the team to beat. Everybody's trying to beat them. How do we become more athletic to go toe-to-toe rather, with the Chiefs, with the Bengals, and company? That's a big deal. So I'm going to address some comments that I'm getting as I'm seeing a lot of comments kind of filter through here. Of course, if I have any interruptions, as sometimes the podcast comments don't always populate. So I'm going to go to the actual stream on my Facebook. It might actually play it both at once, so I apologize for that. But I'm seeing the comments trickle in here. So far, so good. Chris Lyon mentions T. Higgins. Now, of all the free agency moves that have been made, out of all of the headlines that have been brought about from this offseason thus far, there is no player that is of more interest to any team that wants to add a wide receiver than the apparent availability of T. Higgins. Now, a topic that I kind of debated on my X at Ryan Thomas Take /Twitter. I debated this one. Would I trade a first-round draft choice for T. Higgins? Would I trade the 28th overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft? I think the key scenario with T. Higgins, any team that tries to trade for him, Chris, is going to have to get an extension ironed out prior to the fact. So the Cincinnati Bengals shopping him, T. Higgins and his representation, they'll reach out to whichever teams they want to, as the Bengals have kind of allowed T. Higgins to do that. Although they franchise tagged him, they know that they don't want this distraction hanging over their head. They also know that maybe, just maybe, they'll look to try to shop him and kind of expedite the process, if you will. And to me, I understand why T. Higgins wants to get traded. You see a guy like Calvin Ridley get a 4-year, $90 million deal. You see a guy like Gabriel Davis get a 3-year, $50 million deal with $39 million guaranteed. Of course, T. Higgins is in that 100 million plus range, according to my rankings, as far as T. Higgins being one of the better wideouts in the league, easily would be a wide receiver one on any other team outside of Cincinnati and a few others. But safe to say, is the best number 2 wideout in the league. So if it were me, and if I were the Buffalo Bills, I would try to make a move for him. Now, there is a little bit of, strategic politics here in terms of the Bengals' willingness to trade T. Higgins to an arch rival AFC team. I would assume that if the Bengals were smart, they wouldn't want to trade one of their best players to a team that they could potentially meet in the playoffs. So I could see T. Higgins going to an NFC team, more likely than not a team that already has a quarterback in place, but those options are so few and far between. Maybe they send him to the Eagles. Maybe they send him to the Falcons, who just added Kirk Cousins to pair with Drake London. And now, Bijan Robinson, a big part of that puzzle as well moving forward now that they've moved on finally from Arthur Smith. Hopefully they can embrace the run game a little bit more in Atlanta than they did last year. But there's a lot of destinations for T. Higgins to go to. I'd love for it to be Buffalo. I would trade the 28th, I did it again, 28th overall pick for T. Higgins and see what happens. But they would have to, be on top of things as far as getting that extension done. There's other teams that are shaking and moving. There's other teams that are out there that are looking to make their impact and try to get their impact player. Of course, there is a team out there that is looking to three-peat, and that kind of goes to the next comment. Scott Reed chimes in, and he says, Mahomes restructures. Is Kansas City going after Higgins? They're going after Higgins. They're going after somebody, because for a team that won the Super Bowl last year, 3 out of the last 4 years, this was the worst supporting cast that Patrick Mahomes has ever had, and they were still able to come away with a Super Bowl title. So it just goes to show you that had they had, the Tyreek Hill still, had they added somebody to replace Tyreek Hill of substance, not named Kadarius Toney, of course, I think that they would have been even better this year and have been able to, get past some teams even easier than they actually did. There was a lot of close games. The division was still up for grabs. The AFC West, that is, towards the tail end of the year. The Chiefs ran away with it, of course. But for the most part, realistically, I felt like, this was the worst supporting cast the Chiefs had. That was largely why I believed the Chiefs wouldn't get past the Bills. But ultimately, it didn't matter, unfortunately. Keep those comments coming, of course. So going to, some graphics that I posted, there are some big moves that were made. And the first one that I want to discuss in terms of moves that were made that I'm really happy about, moves that were made that I'm very, very excited about. would be none other than most of these moves being re-signings. The Bills are in a position where they're not really able to go out and, keep one of their, not go out and keep, but go out and sign a guy like, let's just say Josh Jacobs or Tony Pollard or Calvin Ridley. With the money that they were given, of course, those were exponential deals. But to me, posted this graphic when it was announced, as I have with all the other graphics and news and announcements, an extension of AJ Epinesa. This was a move that I was really excited for. AJ Epinesa getting extended, a 2-year contract, $7 million base salary with incentives that could lead him to making as much as $20 million for the year, for the contract rather. So I'm very pumped for AJ Epinesa that he was able to come down with this contract. This was a big priority of mine. And when I put this podcast together, as far as the banners and such, that, I like to add to this show, he was one of my top priorities, as well as Daquan Jones. And we'll talk about Daquan Jones, but to me, I think AJ Epinesa is an ascending player on this team. I think AJ Epinesa is a guy that is going to only get better. And that excites me because we're talking about a team that needs to know who's ascending, that needs to know who's on the decline. And I think it's become very apparent, even this early in the offseason, the players that Brandon Beane has kind of itemized. Who's an ascending player? Who's a declining player? We want to keep the guys that are young and ascending. We might want to part ways from the guys that have had injuries over the last few years, guys that have needed to, show that they're ready, willing, and able, that haven't these last few years, that have suffered, devastating injuries. So that's a huge piece to the puzzle, as well as this next piece to the puzzle in terms of allowing the Bills to be able to move forward within the constraints of their situation salary cap wise. Now, I would refer to this as a transaction. I really would. It was a mutual agreement between the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen to restructure his contract. And not only did Pat Mahomes do it, Josh Allen did it as well. Takes that base salary down from $44 million to $30 million. Kind of differs some of that bonus money and finagles that, structures that to where the Bills will be able to get to that cap number and be able to make some moves moving forward. Now, it's going to be a lot easier for the Buffalo Bills to make moves post June 1st with $10 million more in salary cap space, given that that's when the money comes off the books for Tre'Davious White. Then the dead money kind of offsets that. $6 million in the cap, $4 million dead money. So it's a little bit of a I guess, loss in that sense, kind of a catch-22, if you will. But the way that I look at it, quite frankly, I'm looking at it as any help is a help. Any help is important. Any help gets the Bills to one step closer to the names that they want. Now, today, a lot of people came out and said that they didn't really like the move of the Bills signing wide receiver Mack Hollins to a one-year deal. And I'll be honest with you, Mack Hollins being on a one-year deal, Mack Hollins being somebody that they brought in as a journeyman wide receiver 4. That's what I look at Mack Hollins as. I look at him as an upgrade in that role as a wide receiver 4 in comparison to who they had last year, Trent Sherfield, Deontay Hardy. Two guys that were smaller, one extremely quick, one more of a savvy, experienced route runner. Both didn't really contribute a ton to this team. I'll be quite honest with you. Till the end of the year, Trent Sherfield really hadn't done anything. Till the end of the year, Deontay Hardy was strictly a returner, largely due to the fact that Nyheim Hines was out for the season. So 887 people tuning in right now. Thank you so much. I have to, check this number as it goes through. Huge for this show. Big, big stuff. Retweet this, share it. I'd like to see myself get to 1,000 tonight. Of course, 800, 900 as we're coming up to the halfway point of the episode. I'll stay on even longer to get to that 1,000. I still got a lot of stuff to cover. So greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. But to me, I like Mack Hollins a lot. I like the fact that Mack Hollins is a player, 6'4", 220 pounds, ran a 4.540 in the combine, and it's a 1-year deal. Let's be honest here. 1-year deals are to fill a role, fill a spot, be a body, be an able body. And to me, physically, skill set wise, these are the guys that I think the Bills haven't necessarily looked at in the last probably 10 years. They've looked for a lot of guys that are 6'1", 6'2", 6 foot, 5'11", guys that are quick, guys that are shifty. We go back to when they had Cole Beasley and John Brown. They didn't have a guy that was 6'4". They didn't have a guy that lined up as a 1, 2, 3, or 4 that was 6'4". So I think the evaluation of the position has also evolved a lot league-wide. We're seeing a lot of teams with multiple wide receivers that are above 6'2", 6'3", 6'4". And in some cases, you look at the draft this year, the prototypical wide receiver for today's NFL, the reason why he's rated at the top of everybody's draft board, Marvin Harrison Jr., is not just because the name is similar to his father's. He's not just because he's the offspring of a Hall of Famer, but you look at physically what this guy can do, what this guy can bring. He's a much different presence at that position than your average wideout. So that's how I'd kind of lump Mack Hollins in terms of just a big body, guy that can move around, guy that can play anywhere on the field, and somebody that can run block. That's a huge deal in terms of losing a player like Gabe Davis to bringing in a player like Mack Hollins and keeping some of our own. Now, I'll be the first to admit, this run that I've been on these last few days, as far as tweeting a lot, posting a lot of graphics, just being interactive with the Bills Mafia, I did get duped just as much as anybody with the news that the Bills agreed to terms with left tackle Dion Dawkins on a 3-year contract extension through 2027. Now, this was a deal that I knew that the Bills would prioritize, and I was really happy to see it get done. But when Dion's posting these stories and posting these very vague, remarks towards what's going on at One Bills Drive, I'm thinking to myself, this can't be real. This is something's not right. He kind of says his au revoir, his sayonara to Buffalo, and I'm thinking, no, they can't let this guy go. They can't. This wouldn't be right. 2 minutes later, he tweets that, they're extended, and Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter and all these guys. 1,001, by the way, 1,000 people live. I got to take a picture of that because it's a big deal. Big ratings, big boost. 1,000 plus. Keep it coming. Keep the comments coming. I'm going to get to them. Don't worry. But Dion, a huge piece of what the Bills do on and off the field, leadership, no doubt about it. One of those players that I look at and say, you had to keep that guy. If you were losing other leaders, you got to keep another to make a leader, right? And I think Dion is an obvious candidate for that. I think he's coming off of his best season as well. So that was huge. Backup quarterback Mitchell Trubisky brought back to a 2-year contract, got that position locked down. I know a lot of Bills fans weren't really too happy about Mitchell Trubisky being brought back, but I look at it as he's familiar with the building. He's familiar backing up Josh Allen. He's familiar with being a part of this sort of, Brady, Dorsey, Dable offense. So we'll see. Mitchell Trubisky, it hasn't panned out for his starting career, right? But doesn't mean he's not talented. Doesn't mean that he doesn't have attributes that make him a quality backup in this league. And I would envision him as being that. So let's get to some more comments. In terms of the draft, let's go to, I got one. Okay. Let's talk 716 Sports. Robbie says, thoughts on Damar Hamlin. Now, I'm just going to kind of take this in my own direction because I'm not certain what Robbie's referring to. Thoughts on Damar Hamlin, like as his future, or starting, or what, where the context of the question is going. But I'll put it like this: I know a lot of Bills fans were frustrated over the fact that DeMar somewhat played his cards and said that he was really looking forward to potentially be a Steeler at some point in his career. I would say the same thing as far as being a part of your hometown team. Let's just say I was playing in the NFL for the Indianapolis Colts, and I was there for a few years. You know, it's like, hey, if I'm going to go anywhere, I'd love to come back home. I'd love to come to Buffalo. That's all that is. There's a lot of guys out there too, you know, baseball-wise. Jordan Montgomery being a big name that's still a free agent was a huge catalyst as to why the Texas Rangers won the World Series, their first World Series. And Montgomery, his wife, is a doctor out in Boston, and she's from there. So they have to be apart when he's playing in Texas. She's living in Boston, working at one of the many clinics out there. He's a free agent. He wants to go to Boston. It'd be a lot easier for him to be in Boston, to be close to his family. And, you know, that's a real thing. I mean, these people are human just as much as I am, just as much as you all are. And that's why I do think Jordan Poyer went to the Dolphins. Now, kind of goes hand in hand. I segued there because a lot of people were shocked by this. But I wasn't. And I wasn't for a wide variety of reasons. I knew that the Bills let Poyer test the market last season. He tested it. It wasn't what he thought it was. So he came back to Buffalo for another year. They signed him to a 2-year deal where they could cut him after this season and they'd get some cap relief from it. Essentially a 1 year, that's what it was, a 1-year deal. They let him go. He signs a 1-year, $2 million deal with the Dolphins. I'm not sure if there's any incentives in that, as I see 1,107 people tuning in. But of course, I'm taking pictures of that. That's huge. So Poyer moving on, 1 year, and it's a 1-year deal. He's had some shoulder issues. I'm no doctor, but anyone that I know that's in, you know, the sports medicine, sports doctor, injury, you know, aficionados, he's had plenty of shoulder injuries, and he's a safety. He's played safety for over 10 years in this league. So it was time to move on. And I really want to say that if there's any player that I wish the best of luck to, you know, among the others that have moved on from the Bills, Jordan Poyer would be at the top of that list. He's a great dude, high quality human being. He's done a lot for a lot of people in this community, you know, working with ECMC and working with rehabilitation programs with all the struggles that he had gone through. You know, working with Alcoholics Anonymous and things like that. Jordan Poyer is a great dude. I wish him a lot of luck, you know, not too much. I'm not going to root for him against the Bills, but I am going to say best of luck. And he's not the only Buffalo Bill to go from Buffalo to Miami. Siran Neal, special teams ace. Buffalo let go of the day that they released Poyer. He as well signs with the Miami Dolphins. So, hey, playing in Miami is not a bad thing, right? Miami's a gorgeous city. Let's be honest, right? So, you know, playing in the warm weather, getting a chance to, you know, suit up for another NFL team, I have nothing against it. These guys got to get their money while they're playing. Now, moving on to another comment here. Jared of 24/7 Buffalo Fandemonium, he states that he feels that Rapp is going to fill in nicely for Poyer. And I agree in this sense. I mentioned something on the K-Gun Report last night. Now, they're talking about, if I'm remembering it correctly, they're talking about why Rapp was kind of the Tasmanian devil, a little bit too much in certain instances. And to me, I looked at it as Rapp is so excited to be out on the field and the limited opportunities that he had that he was just playing through the whistle, not playing the whistle blew. He was playing past it, which that's where it can kind of come into a little bit of an issue. But I love guys that play balls to the wall, right? I love guys that play sideline to sideline. And I loved Taylor Rapp when he was in the Rams organization. I loved when they brought him in. I thought this is going to be an interesting transition from Jordan Poyer to Taylor Rapp. So being kind of a step ahead in this regard at the safety position with Rapp replacing Poyer, I think is huge. Now, there's no word yet on Micah Hyde. I don't want to jump the gun in looking at Micah Hyde too far ahead, but judging that if there's any player that's as close-knit with his family, it's Micah Hyde. He's got the charity softball game. His family's there, his wife, his kids, all that stuff. Pillar of the community, and his wife put out a beautiful statement as the season came to a close. He seemed pretty coy about his plans and what he wants to do. I'd lean towards him hanging them up because, where Jordan Poyer had the shoulder injury, Micah Hyde had suffered some neck injuries. That's very serious for obvious reasons, right? We want these guys to come away from this game as healthy as humanly possible, and it's a lot easier said than done. Playing this game that is ultra violent, that is a car crash every single play, but at the same time, I would love to have him back. The fandom in me says I'd love to have him back. 1,200, thank you. So, of course, Jared did chime in, and he kind of piggybacked off of my point that I said about Poyer's Instagram live video. The shoulders looked rough, Jared. They didn't look right? And that's due to the collisions. That's due to bumping, right? That's due to the bumping of the shoulders. I see a lot of professional wrestlers and even amateur wrestlers with the same issues. When you collide with another body over a long period of time, the wear and tear, we're not made of metal. We're not made of iron, right? So we're flesh and bone. So it is what it is. It is what it is. But I don't think he'd do it over again. Or not to say, I don't think he regrets doing it, and I think he would do it over again. That's what I meant to say. So let's get to some more. Okay, so not only were Jordan Poyer and Siran Neal headed to the Dolphins, but two other former Bills went to the exact same team. I want to start off with Gabe Davis to Jacksonville. So I touched on this contract a little bit earlier today, touched on the contract a little bit earlier in this episode as well. And to be honest with you, if I'm looking at what's a good fit, if I was in Gabe Davis's shoes and I knew that I wasn't coming back to Buffalo, this is probably a pretty damn good fit. He's going from Josh Allen to Trevor Lawrence, player that I have a lot of, love and respect for, a guy that I think is definitely ascending as really the only good quarterback of his class as we look at that in hindsight. You had Trevor Lawrence, you had Justin Fields, Mac Jones, to name a few. Zach Wilson. Wow. Yeah, Trevor Lawrence, far and away the best quarterback in that class. And Gabe Davis gets a chance to, pick up kind of where he left off with a pretty decent quarterback. As well, Lawrence likes to spread the ball around. He liked to get it to Calvin Ridley. He liked to get it to Christian Kirk. Calvin Ridley, he moves on to the Tennessee Titans. Gabe Davis takes his spot. But realistically, I think if Gabe Davis had a choice, I think he would have stayed in Buffalo. But these guys are at the top of the food chain athletically. They want to get as much money as possible. It's not about choosing where to play and, going. You're choosing among all the teams that are bidding for your services, and Buffalo was never in the bid for his services. So definitely huge for Gabe Davis to get that contract, the contract that he wanted. And I don't know if it's the contract that he, quote unquote, deserved. I think the market was really beneficial to Gabe Davis in terms of other wide receivers. Michael Pittman gets a huge contract. Mike Evans gets a huge contract. Two guys that were supposed to be free agents that didn't end up being free agents because those two teams have access to more cap space. So for me, when I look at that, I say to myself, you know what? It is what it is. Best of luck. I think it's a good fit. I don't know if it's a great fit, but I think it's a good fit. And we'll just leave it at that. Now, the one that really grinded my gears and kind of frustrated me, shocked me, was when the Bills let go of Mitch Morse. And to me, I think this is more of a cap casualty / health related because Mitch Morse had suffered through some concussions. They wanted to open up some cap space. Mitch Morse to the Jaguars. Talk about centers, that position that want to play with elite quarterbacks. Mitch Morse played with Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and now Trevor Lawrence. Pretty damn good career. And I follow Mitch on social media pretty closely. I don't think he was expecting to move forward to another team. He was embracing year 9 with Buffalo, but it's going to be year 9 with Jacksonville. Part of the business, part of the game. As I kind of move forward, as I mentioned from the opening statement, wanted to kind of look to the past, give everybody my take on, these former Bills now playing in other spots as I approach 1,300 live viewers. So also, the Bills signed linebacker Nick Morrow. Now, to me, this was a big need, depth-wise, linebacker. This team had suffered through some horrible injuries defensively. Trey White being a part of that, that's why he was released. But linebacker-wise, Matt Milano going down when he did, how he did, why he did, was really hard. As well, Terrell Bernard, he had suffered an injury late in the season, and wasn't able to go against Kansas City. That made a huge difference. I'd like to think that if he was out there, it would have really mattered. To me, I thought he was one of the biggest Pro Bowl snubs out there. I thought he was phenomenal as we pass 1,300. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Fire away your comments. Keep them coming. Keep them flowing. So, of course, Nick Morrow, to me, when you look at the stats, just strictly the stats, August of 2023, Nick Morrow was headed to the practice squad for the Philadelphia Eagles. He was available for essentially any team to claim off of the Eagles practice squad. Nobody did. The Eagles were able to kind of promote from within with other injuries that they had, the mixing and matching that they love to do defensively, to try to schematically create mismatches, speed mismatches. That's really what Philadelphia's defense prides itself on. And to me, I watched quite a few Philadelphia Eagles games last season. They're usually on Fox after the Bills are on CBS. And this guy can fly. He can tackle. He can tackle behind the line of scrimmage. He can fill in gaps. He's a very interesting piece depth-wise to what the Bills like to do with guys that kind of interchange and mix and matches. Philly's been doing that for years. Where did Sean McDermott come from? Philadelphia. So I don't think that's a coincidence. And I think that Nick Morrow is one of those players that, yeah, he's bounced around. He was in Chicago. He was in Philly, but 1-year deal. Not the end of the world that we're bringing in guys on 1-year deals. We know why that is. At least they're able to do it, right? At least they're able to target somebody and say, hey, this guy's on the cheap. Identify those solid, good players that I don't think cost a whole lot of money. Ken Zintel, longtime viewer and supporter of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast with the beautiful Bills helmet as his profile picture, just says, hey, he's just let me know. I'm here. I'm watching. I appreciate it. Heather Fogarty says, why not cut Von Miller? If it was that easy, Heather, I agree. If it were that easy, I think they would have done it already. and I understand where you're coming from. I really do. Nobody is more critical of Von Miller than me. Any of the shows that I've been on over the last year or two, I've really had it up to here with Von, right? But he did restructure his contract. He did allow the Bills to get more cap space, and realistically, it makes sure that this is probably the last year that he plays in the NFL. I think this is the last year for him. I don't see him coming back 25, 26. I think 2024 to 2025 is the last season that we see Von Miller on the Bills or on any team in the NFL. I think he's preparing for life after football. He's got other side ventures, businesses, media, things of that nature. So why not? They're not going to do that. He's got this year, and then they'll move on. He'll retire, and that'll be it. So another thought, too, is, I mentioned Morrow as far as depth. I look at Morrow as well as far as a player in this regard that Scott mentioned, a player that can be a depth piece for Matt Milano. Yeah. I will say that I know for a fact that both Trey White and Matt Milano have both been at One Bills Drive rehabbing, working with the physical therapists, working with the medical team that is within the Buffalo Bills, which is rated as one of the best in the league. For obvious reasons that go beyond Mar Hamlin, I think Kevin Everett, dating back to him, Bills have always had a really good medical team, despite the fact that they've faced a lot of injuries. I think a lot of that is just the game and bad luck, unfortunately. But Matt Milano, whether he's ready for week 1 or not, it's nice to have another depth piece. It's nice to have another depth option as we look at, this team and look at finding this team in similar circumstances to years past where a guy goes down, they're thin at that area, 1,400 live, thin at that area, and putting themselves in a position to where they're ahead of it and they want to be ahead of it. So I appreciate all the comments. Man, this is one of the biggest shows in the history of the show as far as live. 1408, which is kind of a creepy omen. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that movie with John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson. That movie gave me nightmares for a long time, probably a couple years, to be honest with you. But going around the NFL, I'd like to kind of touch on this a little bit. I know this is a Bills show, but running backs are getting paid. Finally, put some respect on their name. Josh Jacobs to Green Bay, Saquon Barkley to the Philadelphia Eagles. Tony Pollard, one of the first dominoes to fall. Tony Pollard leaves the Cowboys to go to the Titans. And this one, holy smokes, Derrick Henry to the Baltimore Ravens. That's interesting. That's one that made my ears perk up because you have Lamar Jackson, very elusive quarterback, obviously. They've been a solid run game for the last few years, and adding Derrick Henry to that, very interesting. Very interesting. Austin Eckler. Now, this is a guy that, to me, is on the bad luck end of the running back position. Timing did not work in his favor. At the top of his game, he wasn't getting paid the money that he should have been, and on the downside, he gets a 2-year deal with like $11.2 million from Washington. I hope Austin Eckler balls out this year. And I hope that he says, y'all must have forgot. And I hope Washington reaps the reward of that. Sometimes one man's trash is another man's treasure. So going to this next slide, 38 minutes into the show, I expected to be on for about an hour tonight. So this is huge. This is huge. Looking at what areas are positions of need for the Buffalo Bills, the wide receiver position is number one to me. And it's glaring. It's as glaring now as it was when the season ended with the guys that were on the field, right? Regardless of whether guys are extended or re-signed or whatnot. Felt like they're really thin at wide receiver specifically. There was Diggs and a big drop-off, to be fair, from Diggs to Gabe Davis. Shakir bridged the gap a little bit between himself and Gabe Davis, I would say. And then you had, the Sherfields, the Hardys, the Isabellas, kind of the throw-in players that were added throughout the year and in the offseason, last offseason, that you didn't expect to be back. Quite frankly, I didn't. So to me, that's a huge deal. And with that, I want to talk about some free agent wide receivers that I think are solid options for the Buffalo Bills to target. Now, these are names that people are going to be like, but I'm not saying that these names are better than such and such. Most of those guys have already been signed, and they've been signed to big contracts that the Bills simply can't afford. So when I look at this, I looked at this list on Spot Track, however you say it, and I just tried to find the good in these positions that can fit like puzzle pieces to the Buffalo Bills and what they need, and can fit within a role that has already been created in this offense last year and in years past. So I want to start off with a name that brings a smile to my face. If you're a Buffalo Bills historian, you should always remember Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd has been a cog in the Cincinnati Bengals lineup. He has been a solid slot receiver for Cincinnati for the last, half decade and then some. 7 years plus. Dating back to 2017, he had that big catch from Andy Dalton that propelled him to the end zone that helped the Bills break their drought. I've always been a Boyd fan. He's been a sure-handed slot receiver, and I think Josh Allen in particular has really needed that. They asked Dalton Kincaid to play within that role a little bit, and he was able to do that. But I think Dalton Kincaid and Knox, two tight end sets, as well as Dalton Kincaid out wide, could create a lot of different matchups for the Bills offensively, schematically against the opposition. Boyd, a strictly solid, sizable slot receiver that also creates mismatches. I really like him a lot. I don't think he'll come to Buffalo for a ton of money. I don't think he's in line to demand a ton of money to where he could be a really good fit for the Buffalo Bills. As well, DJ Chark. Now, this is a name that has bounced around a lot. He went from Jacksonville to Detroit to Carolina last year. I think a lot of people, myself included, thought that Chark would be like the wide receiver one of the Carolina Panthers. I think for a lot of reasons that were out of his hands, he wasn't. Adam Thielen was that guy. So to me, I think Chark is capable of being a solid player within this offense as a 2-3 hybrid type guy that could kind of just be put on one side of the field, 6'4", 230 pounds, kind of falls in line with what I was saying about Mac earlier. 1,500, by the way. Took a picture of that one. 1,500 live. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. So, of course, as I look at this and I say to myself, DJ Chark, a name that I really like. Stephon Diggs, DJ Chark, and Tyler Boyd. And I'm calling for them to sign at least 2 out of these 4 guys that I mentioned. There's 4 that I mentioned here that I really like. The next one was cut today by the Las Vegas Raiders, Hunter Renfrow. Now, I threw this in there because I didn't anticipate that Renfrow would be cut. And he is in that mold of a Welker, of an Edelman, of a Beasley type slot receiver that can get open. It's clear. That's all he's been able to do. He's been able to get open. I think the philosophy of the offense changed not only post Derek Carr, but post John Gruden. John Gruden was heavily reliant upon Hunter Renfrow in the West Coast kind of 3 wide receiver set offense. Whereas that's very similar to where Allen was very good within that style, where you got 3 guys lined out wide, 11 personnel, and you have one underneath. Hunter Renfrow, Tyler Boyd in that same mold. I don't think these guys are going to ask for much money, to be quite honest. So that's one of the reasons why I listed these 3 thus far. And then Curtis Samuel is a name that I think fits with Buffalo. There's some parallels that he worked with coaching-wise in Carolina, coaches from Carolina that Sean McDermott brought over to Buffalo positionally. Offensively, Joe Brady, obviously there's a connection there. As well, I think that he has had years in this league that have been very successful and then years that haven't been, largely that are out of his control. Changes in offenses, changes in quarterbacks, changes that limited his skill set, limited his game. And I think that kind of falls in line with DJ Chark, as well as Hunter Renfrow, as well as Tyler Boyd. All 4 of these guys are in similar positions due to the teams that they had played on vastly changing. And one team that's not going to change, one team that's going to have stability. Quarterback Josh Allen and offensive coordinator Joe Brady, neither one of them are going anywhere. So if I was any one of these 4 wideouts, I'd be calling my agent saying, if we're not getting any realistic offers here that we want monetarily due to teams' salary cap constraints, why not Buffalo? Why not? And then last and certainly not least, this is just to stir the shit pot, as I like to call it. OBJ. Here we go again. OBJ, a free agent. I just had to throw this one out there. Do I want Odell Beckham? I want Odell Beckham in 2013. Odell Beckham in 2024, it's another story. But 1-year deal. Could be on the cheap. Could be somebody that strikes fear into the heart of the opponent. You have Diggs on one side, OBJ on the other. Even in a limited capacity, I thought he did pretty well in Baltimore last year, especially towards the end of the year. There were flashes where OBJ showed his old self, young self, as an old wide receiver. So as an older wide receiver, I should say. He's not old. He's just suffered some really rough injuries. So could be a little bit interesting in terms of some of these names that I mentioned. I'm mentioning free agents. The draft stuff, we got that covered. I'm not jamming that all into one show. I got to save some for the next one. Hollywood Brown as well. Marquise Hollywood Brown bounced from the Ravens to the Cardinals. I know the Cardinals situation pretty well, just kind of due to some friends being Cardinals fans and things like that. Obviously, D-Hop kind of stunted the production there. Kyler Murray's, health situation, the coaching staff situation changing. Hollywood Brown wasn't really able to produce at the level that he can. And I like these guys as bounce-back candidates. And then former Bill Isaiah Hodgins is rumored to be cut by the Giants. Could the Bills bring him back? That's a possibility. So a lot of names to discuss as far as available wide receivers. Now, as well, here's one that I find interesting, and it's running back. Now, people roll their eyes whenever the running back position is brought up as one that you should address in free agency. But the only reason that I am is because Brandon Beane has done it before. This is not the first year where the Bills could possibly be in the veteran running back market. They had signed Latavius Murray. They had signed Leonard Fournette. Did those work to a long-standing level? No, but you're not going to ask them to. They're only there to kind of provide a limited role within the offense. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. Veteran running backs to target in free agency that Buffalo could go out and get. Some have a lot more tread on the tires than others. First one that jumped out to me that I know is desperate to catch on is Ezekiel Elliott. And he was rumored to be in the circles of the Buffalo Bills. Patriots went out and got him. Ramondre Stevenson suffered some injuries last year. Zeke was really the best player on offense for the Patriots. And that just goes to show you how horrible the Patriots were last season, because I think Zeke would definitely be a solid backup to James Cook and company. He's a name that I want to throw in there. I think he's still got a little bit left in the tank. Throwing it out there. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, this is a name that really interests me a lot because, to me, before the Chiefs found a diamond in the rough in Isaiah Pacheco, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was the guy. He was the guy that they went out and traded up to get straight out of LSU. I think he's got a lot more to offer, and I am assuming that he was pretty pissed off about what happened in KC, and now he's kind of just this outcast, former Chief that didn't really do a whole lot for the Chiefs and was kind of put on ice. I want that guy. I want any player that is pissed off at the Chiefs for any reason at all. Now, he's not going to go out and tweet that, but you mean to tell me that he wasn't frustrated over losing his position to a 7th-round pick out of Rutgers? Come on. So bring any player to the Buffalo Bills that's potentially pissed, even slightly agitated with the Kansas City Chiefs. I'd take that guy every time. Now, another name that is out there that was already replaced by his last team, the Chicago Bears, as they went out and signed DeAndre Swift, one of the first contracts to be signed by any team. DeAndre Swift goes 3 years, $24 million. D'Onta Foreman, free agent, battering ram of a running back, somebody that can blow through the opposition. Really like him a lot. Really good compliment to James Cook. Could go for 1 year as well. So good stuff there. Lots of names to look at, running back, wide receiver wise. I think the Bills are going to address the safety position in the draft. I think they're going to address the cornerback position in the draft. And then these last two for me, defensive line, you can never have enough pass rushers in this league. I think that they are going to make it very clear that Epinesa, albeit on a 2-year deal, he's a part of their future. Beyond that, they're going to be easily able to rework a deal with him beyond these next 2 years. And then Gregory Rousseau, you got to keep those guys together. You have to keep those guys together for as long as one side and the other side, Rousseau, Epinesa, you got to lock those guys up. Ed Oliver's locked up. Defensive line-wise, Eric Armstead is a name that I wanted to bring to everybody's attention. He was released by the San Francisco 49ers. He's a multiple-time Pro Bowler. And I really, really would love a short-term deal from the Buffalo Bills. He's 30, but he's a beast. Beast. I'd love to see him on the team. And then offensive line, they have plans for their line. Alec Anderson probably will be starting at some point. Osiris Torrance was a cog in that lineup. They drafted him. Do they go high first couple rounds? They have multiple fourths, multiple fifths. Maybe they add to the offensive line in those pick ranges in the 2024 NFL draft. So let's get to some comments here. Let's get to it. I see some names here. Okay, let me go here. Okay, Ken says he likes Ladd McConkey. Who doesn't like Ladd McConkey? Or whoever doesn't, definitely should watch more tape of Ladd McConkey. I think they'd come to realize that they definitely should like Ladd McConkey. It's a name that I think I'll throw around a lot more in the next podcast. Realistically, if I were to lay my blueprint for the Buffalo Bills, you have to draft a wide receiver in the first round. You just have to. You have to go out, try to bring in a highly talented player. There's a lot of guys that I really like in this wide receiver class. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors being two of them, but I don't think they'll be there for Buffalo. But there's a lot of other guys that I'll talk about on next week's show, as we'll be kind of past free agency a little bit. We'll be able to look at the draft a little bit more. All right, so let's go to Adam Huxell. He says, I'm late, so it might have been covered. I like targeting the speed burner now, maybe Hollywood Brown, then get the true outside wide receiver 2 in the draft. I mentioned Hollywood Brown as one of my 4 or 5 guys that I'd really like. I don't know what it is. It seems like there is like a stigma against Hollywood Brown that I don't think is fair or justifiable. I felt like he was pretty damn good last season in spades, but in spurts. But in Baltimore, he was a pretty good player. So I think it's just bad luck with some of these players changing teams. It's almost hurt their value more than helped it. Don't think it's an indictment on the player's ability or lack thereof. So, yeah, I like that one too. Bruce McKellar says, we picked up KJ Hamler, has great speed and good hands. What do you think about him? I think that he's an interesting experiment. I don't know if he's a long-term solution because he was out of the league for a little while, but definitely a name that they probably thought, hey, we'll bring him in for a workout. They had to have liked what they saw. And you know what? There are so many facets to this game that I see so many people speculate on that they just don't know, and sometimes I'm guilty of it too. There's things that made people say, why would the Bills cut Mitch Morse? Why would the Bills cut Trey White? They know more than we do. And I try to remember that. I try to humble myself in those moments and say, you know what? They know more than we do. So they know more than we do in guys that they bring in and guys that they let go of. And I think guys that they bring in, a guy like KJ Hamler late in the year, they liked what they saw. They liked something in his game that they thought, okay, we can bring that to the table. And he was a former top pick. I believe he was a first or second rounder. I'd have to go back and look at that. Let me look that up while I got it. 24 years old. 24. I mean, 20 to 22, Denver, 23, practice squad member for the Indianapolis Colts out of Penn State, second-round pick. So Could be an interesting option. Definitely a name to watch in camp for sure. Adam Huxell says, do you believe Justin Shorter stays on the roster? I'm not sure. That's a training camp battle. Maybe that's a battle that he's going to have with some of these other names that they bring in. He's definitely a name that people really like. There's a lot to like size-wise. I think maybe he might be in direct competition with Mac Hollins in terms of the training camp battle. So Mark Krzyzewski says, any idea, Krzyzewski, I think that's how that's pronounced. Hope I got that right. Said, any idea when we can get a real cap number? So the truest cap number that's out there, there's overthecap.com and then there's spottrack.com. Those are the two sites that are as updated as frequently as moves are shaken and moving. So overthecap.com, spottrack.com, those are the two sites that I suggest you taking a look at, Mark. That shows the actual true number as far as where the Bills are at. I don't have that in front of me right now, but I will tell you that the cap space is still kind of limited. They're going to be able to make more moves in the coming weeks, but they're moving and shaking. They're still shaking and moving and shaking. I anticipate something to come up, though, in the near future on that. All right, so I'm going to get this offensive line tab off of here as I wrap up the show. So as it stands right now, 1679, 1680 tuned in tonight to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I knew that this was going to be a big one. And I knew it was going to be a big one for a multitude of reasons. I promoted the hell out of it, number one. Number two, being a part of the Buffalo fan base network. This network has hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter. And that's where a lot of the audience is tuning in, which I greatly appreciate. Been able to communicate with quite a lot of the followers of the Buffalo fan base. And I want to urge anyone that's tuning into this right now, go on X, go to my Twitter, at Ryan Thomas Take. You can see it on the bottom left corner, right there. You can go check out my Twitter, at Ryan Thomas Take, and you will enjoy it. You will enjoy it whether you agree with me, whether you disagree with me. I think the one thing I've been able to do in the 8 years of doing this is get interaction between people that want to agree with me, discuss things with me. There's people that I've talked to that have changed my mind, and there's people that I've talked to have changed their mind. But more than that, we're all on the same team here. We're all rooting for the same team. We all want to see the Buffalo Bills get from point A, from contender, to point B, champions. And I think that does get lost on some people. Content creation is fun. Content creation is a privilege to be able to do. Not everybody can do this. Not everybody can embrace the grind that is content creating. I've been doing it for 8 years. And realistically, I see a lot of really good stuff out there. And then sometimes I see interactions from some people that I just question why they're even doing this in the first place. I think if you're not willing to treat others the way you want to be treated in a public forum, then you're not in this for the right reasons. And some people aren't. You know, some people want to do this just to do it. Some people want to do it because they have a passion for it and they want to interact. That's where I fall in line, right? So I really appreciate you guys tuning in. It was a hell of a show today, hell of a show tonight, I should say. Wanted to just go over a lot of the moves that have been made by the Bills. Of course, just kind of breaking these down thus far. DaQuan Jones, really happy that he was able to be extended. His role within the Bills is huge. Definitely needed to keep him. I mentioned AJ Epinesa. Who I didn't mention is UB Bull Cam Lewis staying in Buffalo. He's been in Buffalo for 9 years, including his college football days. Really cool. Really cool. Quentin Morris solidifying the Bills' tight end room as probably the best in the NFL with Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, and Quentin Morris. And then, of course, I mentioned Mitchell Trubisky signing a 2-year deal to be the backup to one Josh Allen. So 17-17, ending the show on 17-17. That's not just a coincidence. That's our guy. That's the quarterback to the rescue, Josh Patrick Allen. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast tonight. I am Ryan Thomas. I'll be here Wednesdays at 8 each week up until the season and beyond. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you.